Hey, and we're back on the Cubing couch. I am here with Phil Yu.
Hello.
How's your day been so far?
It's been all right. It's been a very long year of working almost every day, so we're really excited to wrap up the year strong.
I'm sure a lot of people already know who you are, but for the very few people that don't, how would you describe yourself?
Sure. So I am pretty much one of you. I am a cuber that started a cube store back in 2011. So before 2011, I was just an average cuber. Loved solving puzzles with my friends, went to competitions, and decided to open up a store with a team of my friends. And now we're still here, still a team of friends, making it happen. And we're still cubers. We still attend competitions, talk to people online. We behave pretty much just like the average cuber, except we work in the business as well.
How did you start? Like, what got you into cubing?
Oh, okay. So a lot of people ask me this randomly, but I don't think I've broadcast this before. So my origin story comes from applying to college. So at least in America here, once you apply to college, you're invincible. Nothing will kick you out of college. Once you get in, you're in. So once I applied to college, I kind of relaxed and said, okay, I'm going to enjoy my last few months as a high school student. What's the weirdest, funniest thing I can do as a hobby to kind of, have a really standout end of that phase of my life? So I decided with my friends to start speedcubing, because at that time it was no one was speedcubing and it was cool. So that's kind of where it all started. I think we just wanted an adventure and we wanted something really different from what we used to do.
How did you come across cubing then? Was it from YouTube or?
So another kid in my school was cubing. So he had a cube. I don't think he was super fast, but there were cubes here and there, so we knew it existed. But we were, a part of the, the group that really went in on speedcubing.
Can you remember what cube that was that you first saw?
Oh, of course, it's the original Rubik's Cube.
Oh,
back in my day, we didn't have much choice.
I mean, back in I'd say 2015, 2016, the kids in school used to all use Zanchis. Everyone used to use a Zanchi.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So that was the first cube I ever saw. And then from that, I was like, this looks really cool. And then I started cubing much later after that.
You're very lucky. Because, the cubes back in my day were like bricks. They were not good.
What companies were out there in 2010, 2011?
So you mean manufacturers?
Yeah.
So Guojia was one of them, Sheng'en. So we get those type A's, type F, type B.
Right.
They were named after letters.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
we had the Rubik's Cube. We had speedcubing kits from Rubik's, and there were some Japanese ones. Yeah, it was a wild time.
Was there a lot of people making their own cubes, or was it just I feel I remember hearing that there was a lot of modding and that kind of stuff?
There was a lot of modding. A lot of hardware back then was really bad, and so you kind of had to mod in order to get an advantage. Modding was a much bigger part of it, and I think more so back in the day because the pieces were so square, and when you have pieces that are so square, it gives you room to sand stuff and take stuff off the pieces. So I guess that was another reason.
So what was the YouTube scene like back then? How did cubing look?
Cubing looked... So the YouTube scene was good. Cubing, I don't think it looked very good because YouTube back then was 360p at most. And so, what we want to see, the fast turning, the colors, the contrast between the, the stickers, you can't really see that on really old YouTube. So YouTube back then, visually it was left things to be desired, but it was cool. A lot of the channels back then were not very motivated commercially, so now channels are, they have to think about money, right? How do I get ad revenue? How do I get sponsors? Cubers back then, I think because YouTube wasn't even developed back then, they weren't so concerned with that, and so the vibe of YouTube was really different.
Can you remember the kinds of creators you were watching in those days?
Yeah, like Pestvik and Monkey Dude.
Oh wow, these are names I have never heard of before.
Yeah, Monkey Dude still like comments on our videos sometimes and like
Wow.
writes us messages. It's really funny. But yeah, there are a lot of cubers back then that are now just like they've grown out of the hobby and they're just moving on with life.
We're gonna do a new segment on this podcast that I haven't done before, which is called Answering Discord's Burning Questions. So I've got a few questions here from Discord members, and we're gonna see how well you can answer them. So, okay, first question. Have you thought about building a warehouse in another country other than the US?
Okay, I get this question a lot, and it depends on how the question is phrased. So there's two ways the question is usually phrased. One is like an intellectual discussion, like what do you think of the idea of putting a warehouse in Europe or Canada or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And then there's another phrasing of the question, which is a little more toxic, which is like, it implies that I'm an idiot for not doing that.
Yeah.
And so how I answer the question really depends on how the question is phrased. So for the first iteration of the question, I usually say like, okay, well, it's really expensive to maintain a warehouse in a foreign country, right? Because not only do we not have any people in that country to do business, we are not familiar with any of the laws, how taxes work, how employment works. It's a lot of cost to do business in another country and, another continent, perhaps. And so, everyone wants the idea of like cubicle in Asia or a cubicle in Europe or wherever, but it's a lot easier said than done. And I guess the second version of the question, I just ask them to tell me how much they think it costs to run a business in a foreign country or a continent, and usually they don't have any idea what they're talking about. So yeah, I guess long story short, it's super hard to do that. As a business owner, I'm very, very interested in the idea, but the execution of the idea is it's another person's full-time job. It's really hard.
What about, this is a follow-up question to that Discord question.
Sure.
But like, what about the idea of using something like Amazon?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, everyone's thought of doing Amazon. If you're a retail store and you don't think about Amazon, you're bad at your job.
True.
So Amazon takes pretty steep fees for fulfilling orders. So the profitability is not great. And right now, the cube industry on Amazon is really messed up because all the listings are basically Chinese companies that are pretending to be American or Western that have these crazy product descriptions. I'm sure you've seen them on Amazon. Like, you can't even read one of the product titles in one breath because sometimes they're so long. And so the competition is really wild. There's no way to really forecast how your business will do in that sea of like authentically inauthentic, stores. And, as a business that's fulfilled orders for many, many customers for many, many years, I think it's our priority to perfect and expand our fulfillment on our own site because, so it's in our best interest to perfect the way that we natively do it. I think that's the most important to us because it's our site. We can give them the best experience, the best product listings, the most variations, custom goods, pro shop stuff, giveaways, special discounts. People can use discount codes from content creators, which helps support creative people, and also customer service. We can render customer service in a more personalized way. So I think there are a lot of benefits to doing it ourselves, and that's something that we want to push instead of going to Amazon for potentially a financial hit, right? Yeah.
Second question was, what made you sponsor Cubehead?
Oh, okay. Everyone asks me this, and I think I've answered this publicly. So Cubehead, I watched him when I was, I was just really curious because he had about 200 subs. But he had a few videos out. I can actually pull up his channel and tell you exactly the videos. So one of them was a pseudo slotting tutorial. One of them was a GAN Smart Cube review, and the other one, I believe it was him solving the cube 2,000 times in one sitting.
Ah, yeah.
And I saw that, and like my brain just checked off all the boxes of like good YouTuber, right? So like he was clearly a good speedcuber. Like he wasn't slow, and I knew that because I watched him solve the cube 2,000 times, and I watched him teach pseudo slotting. And you don't really teach pseudo slotting if you don't know what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
And when I saw his GANI review, I saw some editing work and some presentation, and I was able to understand what his sort of aesthetic is. And everything put together, it immediately checked off all the boxes in my brain. I was like, okay, this person is like a complete package when it comes to what their personality is like, how skilled they are in speedcubing, how skilled they are at editing, how good they are at storytelling. Just everything put together was very complete. And even before he had thousands and thousands of subs, it was really obvious that he was going to be a good YouTuber.
So you've got a premium cube for each color on the sides of the Rubik's Cube, but you haven't got one for orange. So
Yes.
Why is that?
Why is that?
Yeah.
Orange is our least favorite color. No, I'm just kidding. We just need to do something creative for orange, and we haven't done that yet. So because we haven't done that yet, it doesn't exist.
Fair enough.
And yeah, we're not going to lazily just come out with a thing and say, oh, look, this is orange. You know, it needs to be smart, and it needs to be meaningful, and it needs to help cubers. And we need to put more thought into it before we release something like that.
What has owning and running the cubicle taught you?
Ooh, that is a really good question. I know like we have like an hour-ish or more than an hour to talk about this, but I can probably talk about this for weeks. Being at TheCubicle is single-handedly the most educational experience I've ever had in my life. It's taught me more about life and work than any school experience and any other work experience I've had. If I had to think about it and give you one answer, it would be it taught me how to depend on other people.
Interesting.
It taught me how to be dependable, and it taught me how to depend on other people. So to get more into that, when you start a business by yourself, you are literally by yourself, and not only are you like the company president making decisions on, you know, what the company should do, but you're also customer service, you're fulfillment, you're the janitor, you know, you're everything. So slowly when the business grows, you need to fill those roles with other people that are better than you, right? At that area. So for instance, I don't make videos on our main channel by myself because we have people that are way better than me at it. So I think it's taught me how to recognize this is what I'm good at. I'm going to specialize in this thing and continue to do this thing, and then other people can depend on me in that area. But it also taught me to let go of the things that I am not good at and depend on other people who are way better than me. So, you know, I can say with confidence that no one at the company is as good as Ro is in setting up cubes. No one is as skilled as Jesse and Damien in making videos, you know, and I can say that about every person in their job. They have a specialty and they're there so that other people can depend on them. And when you put everyone together, you form a group of people that all depend on each other, and that's a functioning company. And TheCubicle has given me firsthand experience of how that feels.
Yeah, I feel like in businesses, sometimes people are like too afraid to give responsibility away. Like they tend to like micromanage every little bit, but you've done a good job of finding the right people for the right jobs.
Yeah, you can't micromanage and you can't struggle to delegate because if you do, you just have no work-life balance, and you also stress your employees out when you micromanage them. It's really not a great practice.
So when did TheCubicle grow to the point where you could hire people?
It was like a few years in. We hired our first employee after 2 years.
So was it just you on your own?
It was myself and James. So TheCubicle it was founded by two people. My partner James doesn't really, you know, he's not on video all the time.
Right.
But he does exist. He contributes a ton to the company. And a lot of the things that people enjoy now in cubing, you can trace back to James. So yeah, we worked together, and shortly after, we moved the business to somewhere larger, and we were able to hire an employee.
Right. And so starting out with the cubicle, what was like your goal with the business?
Ooh. I don't think we had a goal. Like, we didn't think we would be sponsoring Cubers and events. We didn't think we would be a certain size. I just think we wanted to start and maintain a business that was smart, that was lean, that could function as a business on its 2 feet, and not be a complete failure, I guess.
And what other cube stores were there out there at the time when you started?
Yeah, that's a good question. So you have all those random Chinese stores.
Yeah.
And then domestically, we had Cube Depot, Speedcube Shop, and iCube Mart.
Right.
And maybe there was another one. It was run by Isovire. I forgot what the store is called. But yeah.
How big were they relative to you when you started? Like, were they like huge or were they kind of like small?
No one was huge.
Okay.
No one was huge because the industry was so small. It was impossible to tell who was like the hugest.
Right.
But yeah, they were all doing business and they all existed.
How difficult was it starting out managing the business? Like, when you were first starting out, you didn't necessarily have all the business skills. So how did you go about developing those as the business grew?
So basically, business skill was mostly common sense. When we first started out, we just made sure to not make obvious mistakes. You know, there's some mistakes where you're like, okay, in my business judgment, it was okay, so give me a pass on that, right?
Yeah.
And there's some mistakes where it's just like, bro, why did you do that? That's like objectively stupid, right? So we just tried our best to make sure we didn't make any obvious glaring mistakes. And I think if you take your time to make decisions and you exercise a little self-control and common sense, you wouldn't have too many problems. And of course, like for us, I was a very competitive speedcuber and I understood the consumer really well and the industry really well. So I think that was also a very big plus, is just having all the insider information on how speedcubers buy their cubes and stuff.
You mentioned you had to give away responsibility to certain people that were a lot better than you at certain roles. How difficult was it for you to do that?
Oh, it was super hard. It was super hard. So I make it sound easy, right? I'm like, oh yeah, just like find a person better than you and do it.
Exactly.
But it's actually really hard emotionally because like when you start a business and your business is what pays your bills, like I eat off of like my earnings from the cubicle, right? So like for me, it needs to feel perfect in order for me to do that, because if it's not done right, it might impact my ability to have a lifestyle that I'm used to, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a lot harder than I make it seem. I just think that it's really necessary for a business owner to understand responsibility. But yeah, it was tough. I made a lot of mistakes when it came to responsibilities and delegating stuff.
So when did you start seeing, significant growth in the cubicle? Like, when did you start really getting surprised, like this could be, a full-time thing?
2015 is when I went from school back to the workforce. So I would say like between 2014 and 2015, it became pretty clear that the cubicle was a viable career option. And so I kind of planned my last year of school around working at the cubicle after graduation.
Let's say a cube store was to start up somewhere near you. What advice would you give them starting out that you wish you had when you start out?
Man, that's a weird question. So you're assuming I want to help them, right?
Yeah.
But do I want to help them?
Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. So, okay. So in actuality, it is a conflict of interest for me to want to help another competing store.
Right.
I would actually lose my job if I did that, because it's a serious breach of trust.
Right.
And I can't actually do that. But let's say theoretically that it wasn't, and I was retired or something, or not involved. I would say to any business starting out where, you have Cubicle and SES, which are like giants in the American cubing scene, you have to find your value proposition and you have to find a way to communicate your value to customers. Because I think a lot of customers either buy Cubicle SES or from China or Amazon.
Yeah.
That's like the majority of the American speedcuber sort of buying preference. And not only do you need to convince these people, okay, I have some value that you can't get in these stores, you also have to convince them to quit a habit that they're currently doing, right? Which is like either buying from SES or buying from TheCubicle. That's a habit. People rack up order histories, they get rewards points, they love seeing the social media updates, they love seeing Cubehead and JPerm. They're used to it. It's part of their lifestyle. And so you have to talk a person out of their lifestyle, which is not very easy. And so a lot of thought needs to go into that.
I'd say quite a few people don't realize that you were actually a very competitive speedcuber back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
So like you used a method called ZZ or ZZ.
Yep.
So what is that for the people out there that don't know?
Okay, so ZZ is a method where you orient your edges, and then you can solve anything from a line on the bottom or a complete cross.
Right.
And then when you do your F2L, the characteristic of the method is you don't have to rotate the cube. So it's very physically ergonomic, they call it, and simple. And when you get to last layer, you always have your edges oriented, which allows you to do other alg sets like COLL, ZB, CLS, winter variation, any sort of OLL skip tricks. You can do a lot of algs. And back in 2012, I was ranked second in the world for one-handed average.
Wow.
Which, now I'm like ranked like almost 300. So like the world's pretty crazy now.
Yeah.
I'm glad I got my competing in when I was able to. I started with the beginner's method. It was like a simple layer by layer.
Yeah.
And then I actually did CFOP for a few months.
Okay.
And then I discovered ZZ on the speed solving forums. And then I was like, hey, this is cool. Like, I want to do something different. So I started doing ZZ and just stuck with it.
So you started cubing, I think, when you were 18. Is that right?
That's right. That's right.
At what age did you become world class? And how come it was like such a short time frame? How do you think you got so good so quickly?
Yeah, so I became world class in 2010. So I started cubing in April. I could actually check. I can figure out when I got my first world class result. Yeah, so I got my first world class result in like late 2010. So it was like 2 years. I think it comes down to everything kind of hitting correctly at the same time. So physically, I was very prepared for one-handed. I grew up playing classical violin. My left hand is very, very strong and very flexible. So when I'm solving, it was really easy to understand the physical movements of solving one-handed. And I also practiced a ridiculous amount every day. It was like actually affected my social life and my work-life balance. But it was something I was really passionate about. So I just kept doing it.
Do you think that's why people who play instruments tend to also be cubers? It's because of that manual dexterity?
Yes, it's also something to do with your way of thinking. So when you play an instrument, you're connecting a thought in your brain to a command in your hand to create some sort of effect, right? And that's pretty much what cubing is. Like your brain is telling you to do a thing, and then your hand does it, and then the thing happens. And then you react to the thing and your hand does more things after your brain gives you an update. It's very, very similar to a musical instrument, the Rubik's Cube. I think people are also they're used to the idea of practicing, right? So like, I'm going to practice this part and get better, and I can feel that after I repeat it. The way people practice their instruments is actually extremely similar to how good cubers practice their cubing.
So like building muscle memory and that kind of stuff.
Yep. Building muscle memory, repetitive practice, being self-aware about your weakness, all that stuff.
Do you think if you started cubing at a younger age, you would be like faster? Like, do you think you would have hit world record kind of status if you started at a younger age?
Yep, definitely. Some people say that's a little arrogant. Like, oh yeah, you can't just say you would have gotten a world record. But given everything I've seen and everything I know, I'm pretty confident that I would have had a very good chance of hitting world record. I don't know. I don't feel that's arrogant, having come very close to it by one spot. It was doable. It's just I didn't have enough time when I was older, and my window kind of just shut on me. It was also like very emotionally difficult to let go of that, but I'm okay now. I've let go of it.
So when do you think a person peaks? At what age do you think they've peaked?
So I think that has a lot to do with the events that people do.
Right.
So one-handed is pretty rough. If you're like me and you only do that one event, I think one-handed solvers peak much earlier than other events that don't mess up your hand so much. But I would say like mid-20s to early 30s is when a person would peak if they had no life responsibilities. So another factor that is like really causing people to like peak early, right, is like people are expected to go to school, to have a family, to get a job, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So if you took like a cuber now, let's say Timon, for example, just said, okay, I'm not going to go to university. I'm not going to have a relationship. I'm not going to think about having a job because I'm cubing professionally. Like, I think a person like that could extend their career for many, many years. And it's just like responsibility is just one variable that always affects a lot of cubers. So I think it skews a lot of the data when it comes to when people peak.
So you said that's for like the rough events. What about for something like blind, which is very like mentally challenging?
Blind. So blind is actually pretty physically crazy too now.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Like this boy got a 12. I was like, dang. I think like, yeah, you can cube probably on a professional level in your 30s at least, before like maybe your reaction speed decreases. Like in today's day and age, you can probably compensate a little bit with like look ahead. But I think in about 20 years, if it keeps growing the way it is, it'll be so competitive that maybe you can't afford to do that. I don't know. It's anyone's guess.
Another thing is, why do you think so many people are using CFOP and not using ZZ or ZZ, given that you saw the level of success you did with it?
I was successful, but the guy who was one spot more successful used CFOP.
Right.
So he was more successful than me. But all jokes aside, CFOP has a lot of documentation. CFOP is a lot more productive than ZZ as well. So what ZZ does is, as a reminder, you orient your edges and then you solve a line, right? So you're solving two pieces when you execute whatever you're planning in the inspection. CFOP solvers solve four pieces and can potentially go for an X cross.
Yeah.
And that's just so much more immediately productive than ZZ. And so CFOP solvers get a huge leg up in terms of like momentum in their solve. And same with Rue. Like Rue solves 5 pieces during inspection at least. So they're also very, very productive when they're solving in the beginning. More productive than ZZ.
I feel like CFOP is like the best step up from beginner's method as well. When people go from beginner's method to CFOP, they don't feel like leaving that method for something else.
Yeah, that's very true. And CFOP has a very long history, right?
Yeah.
It's been around for a very long time. It's just got so much documentation, so much history, so much relatability to beginner's methods, and so much proven results that it's impossible to discount CFOP when you're choosing a method.
So I'm going to ask you a tough question. I don't know if you'll have an immediate answer to this one, but what is your favorite cubing video of all time?
My favorite cubing video of all time. That's a tough one. I think the cubing video that kind of resonates with me the most is the beginner tutorial that I made with Chris Olsen and Damien and all the guys years ago. We had so many fun times making that video. We even had multiple lawsuits about that video. So
why is that? Why is that what happened?
Well, yeah, we got sued over that video.
How is it a suable video?
The argument was trademark infringement because we were teaching people how to solve the Rubik's Cube, right?
Oh, wow.
So naturally, some people were not very happy with it. Yeah, that's kind of the deal with that. But it was interesting. A lot happened with that video, I would say. And so, yeah, we have a lot of interesting memories about it.
So, like, what cubing videos do you currently watch? Like, what kind of content?
Oh, that's a good question. I like to watch product reviews if they're long.
Oh, okay.
Because I wanna hear the really smart things people say about products. Yeah, especially critical reviews, like reviews that are negative. I really want to know why people dislike things.
Interesting.
I watch most of the content that our sponsored cubers make. I don't watch a lot of educational content because I'm like beyond teaching. I'm like done. My brain is just like, I can't.
No, but
I can't learn
I
anymore.
feel like you're at a point where like you know a lot of stuff now already as well.
Yeah, I'm not great at cubing though. Like, I clearly there's a lot of things I can learn to get better,
Yeah.
but I'm at a stage of life where I've kind of moved on to other priorities like entertainment and learning and like intellectually,
Yeah.
what people think. So, of course, like, I always love a really fast average. Could watch that and watch a lot of stuff.
So has there been like a recent cubing video that has like somewhat shocked you in the sense that, wow, this video is really good?
Well, I mean, this sounds like really self-serving, but Cubehead always shocks me.
Okay.
He has this skill of turning nothing into something. Like he was in our office 2 weeks ago and with very low resource made a video in about 2 days that just grabs my attention. And I think like, it didn't shock me in a bad way, but it was impressive how a person can just turn objects and, ideas into a narrative.
You recently, well, not recently, it's been a while now, but JR Cuba, aka Jesse, has been part of TheCubicle now as part of like the content creation side of things. So when did you realize you needed someone to work on that like aspect?
So that comes with delegating. So part of my job is to make sure that all our staff members are happy and are being productive and healthy. And we noticed that Damien had a lot of, work on his plate, and he was in a kind of a position where he needed to choose, like, do I make a video on this really cool cube or do I work on other marketing activities? And we were really put off by the choice. Like, we didn't want to make that choice. We wanted to choose both of them, right?
Yeah.
So we were like, okay, let's find a guy that we trust, that we know well, who knows cubing, that we can say, okay, once you join our team, we can just choose all of the things we want to do. I think like that was in part to just make everybody on our team healthier and work in a less stressful environment where they didn't have to prioritize, pick and choose between good ideas.
So like, how do you think TheCubicle's cubing content has like evolved throughout time?
Yeah, so I think like years ago, we were a lot more corporate.
Yeah.
We liked giving people information. And when we were making videos with Chris Olsen, it was also very like information based. Like, we want to hit you with really good content, like high quality stuff. You'll learn everything you want, but it just wasn't as fun.
Yeah.
I'm sure like, if we had told Chris like, hey, let's make it more fun, he would have easily been able to do it. But we just didn't think of that very much because we were not very smart content creators. We just kind of made content.
Yeah.
But now we're thinking about a lot of other variables. And of course, like JR Cuber is a lot younger than me. I think he's 12 years younger than me. So his perspective on what's funny and what's interesting to the audience is different. So then we can combine all our viewpoints.
So what are your thoughts on like how cubing videos are tending to get shorter? What are your thoughts on the shift between these like longer informational content towards this more shorter, quicker entertainment content?
I'm cool with it. I have nothing against it. I think cubing videos are just fun in general, so I support it. Nothing bad to say about it at all.
Recently in a podcast, I said content has shifted from speedcubing content more to Rubik's Cube content, in quotation marks. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's true, but it's also like you can say it's like almost common sense that speed cubing is a subset of Rubik's Cube. So naturally, when you have a much larger pool of like attractive content, people are going to make stuff to satisfy the more general audience than a niche. That makes sense to me. And when you said that, I like immediately agreed with you. Like, I think there's a lot more Rubik's Cube content out there than speed cubing. But I think that's normal.
You guys jumped onto the bandwagon of making TikToks and YouTube shorts. So why did TheCubicle decide it was right to start making shorts and TikToks? Like, when was this?
It was like, there's obviously demand for it.
Yeah.
We don't want to turn our channel into a thing that just makes shorts. Having shorts here and there is a good idea. You know, it allows us to be expressive in a unique way. It allows us to be different. It's also fun when you make content. You know, you make a 40-second thing and you laugh at it.
Yeah.
And it's genuinely fun.
So what would you say you and your team have learned about YouTube Shorts so far?
That just because it's short doesn't mean you should put little effort into it.
True.
Shorts are super complicated to make sometimes.
What are your thoughts on like the creators that make solely YouTube Shorts and are growing based on just YouTube Shorts?
I mean, if they're growing, they're doing something right, and I applaud them for finding a direction that they're happy with. Some people will find it annoying,
Yeah.
but I think a lot of that is probably rooted in jealousy. Like, oh, how come they can make a 10-second video and get 500,000 views? Like, I can do that. You know, like a lot of the time that's like jealousy talking. If a guy has found a way to get that many views and with that little time, they're very efficient and they're doing something right, and you know, that's cool.
I agree. Like there's creators like, have you heard of Soup Timmy?
Soup Timmy is super smart.
Exactly.
Soup Timmy is a very good content creator. Yeah.
And people at first glance might think that, you know, he doesn't put much effort into his videos, but to keep up that
they're dead wrong.
To keep up that level of dedication of uploading every single day the way he did to get to his position now is quite remarkable.
Yeah, when people put Soup Timmy down for being like low effort and simple, it's not, they're dead wrong.
So what makes a good YouTube short / TikTok?
So I think humor is one of them, or intrigue. So it needs to be immediately interesting, or it needs to be funny, or people need to know that if they finish the short, something interesting is going to happen. I think that's like that's what does it for me.
And what do you think about like the difference in the level of engagement between short form content and long form content?
I was going to say there's obviously different types of engagement, but you know, when you make this mix of content, you're really hoping that you can capture the attention of a lot of different types of people. So that's just something that I think a content creator has to accept. You know, maybe people won't watch your entire YouTube video.
Have you looked into like the analytics of the channel in terms of like the shorts and like the main videos?
Yep, I look at it every day.
And did you notice any difference in like who's watching the shorts and where they might be from?
This is the part where I evade your answer.
Right.
Evade your question.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm sorry.
Okay, it's cool.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm not like allowed to talk about analytics specifically.
So not only that, but you also have a personal channel called Phil U.
Ooh.
Why was there a divide between the content on your TheCubicle channel and the Phil U channel? Like, why did you decide to keep them separate?
That's a good question. So my channel used to be TheCubicle's channel, and then I agreed with my staff that the smartest thing to do would be to divide it, because you run into the problem of people mixing up a person's opinions with the opinions of a company. And my personal opinions don't necessarily align completely with the views of a company. So dividing it is the most organized way to make sure that the right ideas are being communicated. And also for me personally, it allows me to express myself whenever I want. And then people can clearly know, okay, this is Phil's opinion and not TheCubicle's.
Right. Okay. Talking generally, when do you think it's best for a YouTuber or a YouTuber to branch off to a second channel as opposed to putting that kind of content in the same bubble as their other content?
That's a good question. I think that consideration should happen very, very late. That decision feels like a decision that's made by an established content creator that is having like a brand identity crisis. Like, oh, is it good for my channel to post these videos on my main channel? Is it consistent with the vibe I'm giving off? You know, that's like something Cubehead did, right? He has this extra channel for shorts.
Yeah.
And, you know, he did that really late into the game when he was already fairly established. And I think that consideration probably should be postponed for people who are newer to YouTube.
Do you think it's ever a good idea to make a separate shorts channel just for shorts? Like, would TheCubicle ever do that?
So that's a good question. I see some content creators doing that. I don't know enough about that subject to give you a good answer. I'm just not skilled enough in YouTube to know the costs and benefits of doing that.
Right, fair enough. That's respectable. So let's go back onto the topic of Cubehead and various other large content creators. People like Cubehead have received a lot of support from TheCubicle. There's obviously various like sales and promotions that TheCubicle do with Cubehead and other creators.
Mm-hmm.
So how much of that is them reaching out to you, and how much of that is you suggesting to them the kinds of promotions you could do?
It goes both ways. So it's everything is so tied together. It's kind of hard to separate. So, Cubehead one day he'll be like, "Hey, I want to make some merch," right? And then I'll be like, "Okay, like if you design something, we'll make it." And then he designs something, and it'll be like, "Oh, okay, I have some creative ideas on how to make it." So then that's already his idea with my initiative and his initiative. And then once we have the merch, we're like, "Oh, wouldn't it be a good idea to put it on sale and do a sale?" And then he's like, "Oh yeah, I'll make a video about it," and it just like it goes back and forth. So, it goes both ways really.
Okay, and how flexible would you say TheCubicle is to having sponsorees? Give them suggestions and ideas for various collaborations.
So we're pretty flexible, as long as the idea is not completely bad. We will always think about it and consider it.
So let's move on to the idea of competition within the Cube Store world. How do you handle staying ahead of the competition in the retailing industry in cubing?
A lot of it is about not thinking about the competition, right?
Right. Sounds a bit counterintuitive.
So of course, like, Cubicle needs to know that SES exists, and SES needs to know that Cubicle exists. Like, if you're completely ignorant, you're not doing your job correctly.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think part of the key is to not focus too much, because there's no idea. We have no idea what they're doing, and they have no idea what we're doing.
Yeah.
So if you dwell on it too much, you can maybe jump to conclusions or make decisions that are impulsive or not well informed. I think at the end of the day, people want value, people want good support, people want product availability, people want a lot of different types of puzzles and accessories, and they want to make sure that any money they spend is going to a place that will take them seriously and will help them. The best way to stay ahead is to just improve yourself and make sure that you're objectively performing at a good level. Everyone has room for improvement in that area.
Has there ever been a case where you've learned something from your competition?
Sure, yeah. I think we look at each other's websites a lot, and so they've obviously noticed certain features on our website that they've integrated into their website. For example, like the color swatches on products that indicate like black and stickerless.
Yeah.
So we were the first to have that, and then they were like, "Oh, that's cool. Like, let's do that." And sometimes it happens with us. We notice something that someone else is doing. It doesn't even have to be SES, but any other retail store, and we're like, "Oh, that's cool. Like, I wonder how it'll look in our business." SES, going back to them, they have certain ways to communicate product availability to customers and shipping guarantees and stuff, and we do not have that on our website. So whenever you notice these differences, you have to think about, is that a good idea? And, do I want to incorporate that? And I'm sure they look at our stuff and think the same thing because, business people being smart. Yeah, you're always learning in the retail world, and you're always learning both from inside the industry and also outside the industry.
How difficult do you think it is to maintain a customer base when there's stores opening like almost everywhere at any time?
Okay, so generally extremely difficult, but in the cubing industry, not so much, because the industry is very, very specialized. It's pretty hard for us, a new business to open up and compete. The businesses now that exist in the country are very fortunate to have a history. Okay. Because if they were to start the business now, it would be pretty tough, honestly.
Would you say that if you started your business now, like let's say TheCubicle wasn't to exist until recently, do you think you would have got as big as you are now? Or
okay, so that's an interesting question. I'm thinking about like two branches of that question. So let's say TheCubicle didn't exist that would mean that the only store in the country would be SES, and that's not possible. Because whenever you have an industry with one company in it, the industry gets all messed up because it's a monopoly, right? Like if you've taken any business course, you know that monopolies are generally suboptimal because there's no incentive to compete. There is no incentive to provide value, because if you're the only person if you're the only store to sell certain products, you're going to do whatever you want with the prices, right? In that sense, like in that hypothetical, I would start the business immediately because two businesses is better than one. But there's another business, there's another hypothetical where, let's say TheCubicle exists and it's run by some other guy, and SES exists as it is, and you're asking what would happen if like I wanted to start a business in the field.
Right.
I probably wouldn't, because it's really hard to do that. These people, like these companies, have existed for more than a decade, developing client bases, developing special accessories that are exclusively sold, at their stores, connecting with consumers. It's a really hard project to spearhead if you're starting from scratch.
And I feel like when you started out, the reason you started was because there was that gap in the market. And
yes, exactly.
Since there is no longer a gap in the market, there's no reason.
Like, I wouldn't jump at the idea of starting a cube store if I was doing it independently now, if two large stores existed already.
Yeah.
I think there are other businesses that I could be doing that would make more sense.
I don't know if I'm going to get censored on this or whatever, but The Thing. So not recently, but some point a year ago, I feel like, you teased this product known as The Thing. It's gone pretty quiet now. So are there any updates on The Thing and the progress?
Yes. So The Thing as an idea is pretty much done. It's something that Albert invented, or Cubics, if you watch YouTube. Mm-hmm. We were on the verge of producing The Thing, but the thing is, Albert seems to have decreased his activity in cubing, and we didn't want to take unilateral action on something that he invented.
Right.
Because it's very unkind and out of place to do that. It's just not fair. So, until maybe we can have a conversation with him down the road to see, like, hey, do you want to make The Thing? But right now, it's just, it's something that we're putting on hiatus because we don't want to do anything that he doesn't expect.
Am I allowed to know what The Thing is, or is that top secret?
I will tell you later. But The Thing is still usable today. It has not been superseded, so it is still very relevant, and it's still a thing.
Is The Thing a cube, or something that is part of a cube, if you know what I mean? Like, can it switch between cubes?
It is not a cube. It is not a cube.
Okay, so I'm very interested. I'm very intrigued.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, you're an engineer, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, you gotta be.
So, sponsorships. You probably get a lot of sponsorship questions every single day. How big are fast cubers in the selling of cubes at your store? Like, how big are like the Timons and the Maxes as part of your business?
They make an impact, but they're not solely there for solving cubes or selling cubes.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I think they're there to bring the brand awareness, which has a lot of unique value. And we're there to help them develop their careers and give them sort of meaning in cubing beyond whatever they get out of cubing themselves. Yeah, it's not all about selling cubes. They do make a pretty meaningful impact, and we try to, in return, make a big impact on their lives.
Right. Certain stores go with contracts and other stores go with no contracts. What is the reasoning behind TheCubicle choosing to do like contract sponsorships?
Contract sponsorships, I mean, I think every serious cubing store uses some form of contract.
Right.
American contracts are just very detail oriented. Our sponsorship contract is not crazy, but I've seen contracts that are like 40 pages long.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even longer sometimes. And, it's just a way to organize what people expect from each other so there's no misunderstanding, right? Because the last thing you want to do is say, like, hey, this content creator is special to me, So we're going to get into a relationship, but we're not going to tell each other what we expect from each other and get into a fight later because he was like, oh, I thought I was going to have this. And you were like, no, I didn't promise that. It's better to be organized and so that everyone knows what to expect and how to do their job and everything. It's not like I'm your dad, right?
Yeah.
And you're a child and I'm like, okay, you have to stay home. And you're like, but I don't want to. And I'm like, no, you're staying home now. And I lock the door.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like that, right? Like, if you have a problem with how your contract is being administrated, or if you have a problem with someone at the company, or if you just don't want it anymore, people do get released from their contracts because most companies in our industry are very understanding and they don't want to force people to have to do something that maybe they don't want to do anymore. So You're not as locked in as you think. It is a commitment. But if things change and if you want to change your situation for any reason, negotiating with a person you have a contract with is a very reasonable thing to do if you want something to change.
Okay. Sponsorships, I feel like, have evolved quite a bit. They started off as just being, free cubes, and now they've gone to something that's a lot more than just getting free cubes. So how do you determine how much a sponsoree is worth?
Okay, so this is like touching on like business process, but I'll give you some general information about it.
Okay.
I think it comes down to what this person provides in terms of sales, in terms of awareness, in terms of how people view the brand. So you have to do some sort of like mental math with numbers that don't exist really, because you can't say like, okay, Max Park is wearing a Cubicle shirt and he's appearing in the World Championship finals. X number of people watches it and that's worth X dollars, right?
Yeah.
It's like impossible to figure out how much that's worth. So you have to do math with numbers that don't exist, basically. And that is not easy. But our philosophy has always been like, if the business doesn't suffer for it, we're happy to try and we're happy to give people a chance to exist in a sponsorship environment to see how it works. But yeah, judging the value of a sponsored cuber is one of the hardest things. You're basically like asking like, how much is this person worth?
Yeah.
Right. And that's an incredibly hard question that sometimes doesn't have an easy answer, or maybe doesn't have an answer at all.
How would you suggest a cuber can make themselves more valuable to a sponsor?
The biggest thing a cuber can do to make themselves more valuable to a sponsor is to make them more valuable to themselves. I see too many people that are like, okay, what kind of content do I make to get a sponsorship?
Yeah.
Right, and it feels like their end goal was to get a sponsorship. I would much rather see a person say like, how can I develop myself and how can I be better myself so that I can deliver more enjoyment and more engagement and more motivation to myself?
Yeah.
That is the attitude that seems more sustainable, right? Because like once the dude gets the sponsorship, it's over. He's like, oh, I achieved my goal. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Like, I guess I'm done. But the person that's investing in themselves and growing in themselves, that's the person we want to see.
I mean, I feel like in terms of YouTube, it forms like a pyramid or a triangle where like the base of the pyramid is content and then everything at the top is like sponsorships, money and that kind of stuff, in the sense that you need to do the bit at the bottom first before you work your way up.
Well, of course, yeah, that makes sense.
So like good content always comes first before thinking about anything else.
Yes. Good content always comes first, and thinking about yourself always comes first.
I feel like this is a business type question that you might not be able to answer, but I'll test it.
We'll find out.
Yeah.
Test it, yeah.
So like, how does TheCubicle work out how much money they have to spend on sponsorships? Like how do you work out how many people you can sponsor in a year, for example?
Oh, I can tell you
Okay.
that. It's generally it's very easy. So our finance department controls all the finances of the company, and they give the marketing department a budget.
Right.
And the finance department says, okay, each division of the company has a budget to spend, and this is the company's total expenses. This is the company's total revenues. Revenues must be greater than expenses in order to make a profit. Yeah. And the people running the department are interested in making a healthy profit so that people can survive and feed their families, right? So based on data that the finance department can collect, they can kind of know what budgets to allocate to what part of the company.
Right.
And so they give the marketing department a budget, and the budget basically means if you spend this much money, the company will be okay.
Okay.
Right. And then the marketing department needs to understand how to allocate all those numbers, which is a wholly different area. But the finance department makes sure that if the company does not overspend, the company will be safe. And that's what most finance departments do in companies anyways.
So you've got this like figure, which is like your sponsorship budget for the year. How is it then decided how much goes into competition sponsorships, Speedcubers, or content creators? Like, how do you distribute that sponsorship fund?
It's a good question. So sometimes it's like made up on the spot.
Okay.
Sometimes the finance department has to calculate what events are happening. So, for example, last year, or I guess in 2022, we did not have U.S. Nationals.
Yeah.
So if we're not sponsoring U.S. Nationals, we're not going to spend any money in that competition, right? Because it didn't exist. Next year, we're going to have U.S. Nationals. So maybe the finance department will be like, oh, okay, there are these big comps coming up. We're going to give you some budget in order to try to sponsor the event. It's not a guarantee, but if it doesn't work out or if something changes, then you can use this fund for something else. So it really depends on the situation and depends on what events are happening or where people are going. So there are a lot of moving parts. And that's why the people in the finance department need to crunch big numbers in order to figure out where the money goes.
When people talk about cubing sponsorships on YouTube, they're either talking about Speedcubers or content creators, but not a lot of people talk about competition sponsorships. What advice would you give to people wanting to apply to get one of their competitions sponsored by TheCubicle?
Write to us. It's really easy. We sponsor...
How do you decide which competitions to sponsor and which ones to not sponsor?
So it's based on market. If it's in the United States, we'll most likely sponsor it because it's in our area.
Right.
And people going to the event can say, oh, hey, it's TheCubicle, right? If it's in another country, we want to check if we're stepping on the person's toes.
Okay.
So like if it's in Australia, we don't want to upset Daily Puzzles. And if it's in the UK... we don't want to do anything that would offend or confuse Cubes UK.
Okay.
Stuff like that. Like we just want to make sure that there are no conflicts, and we don't want to make it feel like we're invading their territory.
Yeah.
But for other places without Cube stores, we just have to see like, are there people actually in this country that visit our site that are interested in us, and that kind of lets us understand how much value we're getting from the exposure at the competition.
What's like the ratio between the number of people that you sponsor that you reach out to yourself and the number of people that like reach out to you?
Ooh, that's a hard question. I'm not sure I'm able to answer that because we have other people that also work in the area that reach out to people and accept applications. And I don't know the full story of what Jules does when he accepts people and when he reaches out himself.
Fair enough.
So yeah, as much as I would like to answer that, I just don't know because I don't monitor his exact activity.
Are you wary of the idea that some other random company could like poach some of your sponsorees?
Yeah, it exists. It happens all the time.
Okay.
And I'm very aware of that.
So like, how do you go about avoiding that? Or do you even go about avoiding that?
It depends on the person. If the person is like outrageously key, I think the biggest thing to do is to develop a relationship with a person, right?
Right.
Like the better your relationship is with a person, the less likely huge and quick changes are going to happen to your relationship. I mean, you can try to lock them up in a contract or whatever, but I think that the smartest thing to do is just to have a good relationship.
Interesting. In terms of sponsoring speedcubers, just people who are very fast at competition, I feel like there's a growing need of them needing a social presence as well. How do you judge speedcubers that are like fast? Do you use their like social presence in like conjunction to their speed?
Yeah, we use everything.
Okay.
So, literally every factor is considered when we figure out whether to sponsor a person or not. It's extremely holistic. You know, where they're from, what their direction is, what events they're interested in, you know, what cubers are near them, how they make content, where do they go, you know, all that stuff.
How much more valuable would you say a cuber is that's fast, but then in addition to that makes something like a YouTube channel, for example?
Oh, it's very valuable.
Would you say that a cuber that only does solving in competition is valuable in this modern day and age of YouTube content?
They would have to be exceptional. Like, I think they would have to be like Timon status in order to not have a YouTube channel and be valuable from a sponsorship perspective.
Do you think there's an actual figure that people should be aware of, that people that get sponsored are usually at this speed?
Yeah, so people who are sponsored for Speedcubing for 3x3 are mostly sub 7.
Okay.
Like, or unless they live in some area of the world that is a special market for us, they're pretty good at cubing. So,
okay. What kind of areas in the world would you consider to be places that are like particularly valuable for someone to be from?
That is a question that I will not answer.
That's
I'm
fine.
sorry.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool. So in terms of sponsoring people based off YouTube Shorts, we've mentioned the Soup Timmies of the YouTube world.
Mm-hmm.
How do you judge Shorts creators, and is it same or different as long form creators sponsorships?
It's pretty much the same. Like it's just like, do they grab your attention? Are they consistent? Does it feel like they're interested in growth, or are they just repeatedly coming out with the same stuff?
Right.
You know, you just have to think critically about every person you see if you're considering them for sponsorship.
Have you sponsored someone solely off Shorts before?
Jules very likely has. I personally have not, but I haven't turned them down either.
Right.
Jules mostly does this, and I'm pretty sure he has. So there is an opportunity to work with us if you just produce shorts.
Interesting. What metrics do TheCubicle use when judging shorts? Like, you've mentioned the subjective side of things, like, are the videos interesting to you? But let's say you're not too interested in YouTube Shorts, but you still want to sponsor Shorts creators. What metrics would you use?
I mean, like the common sense metrics that we can see, like how frequently they're posting, what the subject is, how many views they're getting, what do the comments look like, are people liking it, you know, all that stuff. Okay. I think you would just have to consider everything. Would
you consider it in like the relative scale of shorts in general, given that like a short form video can get millions of views, but a long form version probably won't get as many views?
Yeah, of course. You have to know that shorts have a lot more visibility in some parts of YouTube. So some of them are more likely to blow up in view count.
Right.
But they have also lower interaction and comments, and you can't read descriptions as easily. Like it's all stuff a person has to think about.
So what kind of analytics or metrics do you think it'd be good for someone to include in their application? Because obviously you can't see all of their YouTube metrics. But
that's true.
What kind of analytics should they show to make it as easy as possible for you to then be like, yeah, we should sponsor you?
So analytics can be pretty personal. So don't ever feel pressure to share them if you don't want to. Obviously, like what the retention is, like at what point do people stop watching the video? Your demographics is also important. Like, where are your viewers from?
Right.
And that also goes back to like sponsoring cubers in certain geographic areas, right? It's like pretty much the same thing. Like, are all your views in the United States where we have a market, or in India where there's a huge market, but there's another store that, you know, is doing a lot of the business and we can't really do anything in India ourselves? I think demographics is a big part of it.
We uploaded one YouTube short, or two YouTube shorts actually, and like 99.9% of the people that viewed that short were in Asia. I think 50% of the viewers, and we got like 800k views in like a few weeks, but all of them were from like Thailand, 50%. And we had no idea like there was this big cubing scene in Thailand.
I guess you're famous in Thailand.
Yeah. Would you say it's good for someone to show off that they have broad reach or very specific reach in certain areas?
Oh, okay. So that depends on a lot of other factors, right? So it depends on what kind of marketing they do with their shorts. Like some shorts and some channels are much better at communicating information broadly.
Right.
And some are better at other things. So it really depends on the context, right?
Yeah. What do you think is the biggest mistake you've made in your cubing career or your business?
In my cubing career?
So cubing / business / cubing.
Okay. So cubing career is not starting earlier. That's like 100%. Business career, I'm thinking about something specific. I'm not going to share it because it's fairly personal.
Yeah.
But there was something that we did that caused something to happen that I actually think about and I apologize for to myself, like mentally every day that, I'm alive. And I think I will continue to apologize for the rest of my life. It's very personal, so I don't think I'm gonna talk about all the details.
Okay,
but
fair enough.
Yeah, people do make a lot of mistakes, and some of them you can fix, some of them you can't, and the business goes on, and you have to understand how to maneuver once mistakes happen.
Right. Is it the kind of mistake where the person or people that might have been affected are fine now? Or has it got lasting damage?
I mean, no one really also understands the definition of fine. Are they emotionally okay? Are they financially okay?
Right.
Who really knows? It's hard to say. It's hard to say. Anytime something bad happens to a person and, a lot of time passes by, whether they're fine or not depends on a lot of other things that are happening in their life that you might not completely understand either. So, hard to say. Very hard to say.
What would you say is your biggest mistake on YouTube?
Let me think. My biggest mistake on YouTube?
Something you did wrong that maybe you learned from.
I think making the 3x3 tutorial too long was a mistake that maybe not a mistake, but something I like to think about. Is it better to have a shorter video? I mean, that video got us a lot of views.
Yeah.
And so we're constantly thinking about what might have happened if we'd done it differently. Yeah, just thinking about how we can do successful projects differently is something we think about a lot.
So what are your plans for the future?
Okay, so there's many versions of the future, right? There's short-term and long-term and all that stuff. So short-term, we want to have a good 2023. We want to give customers a good experience. We want to grow up in some areas that maybe were a little underdeveloped. We want to take part in a lot of the important events that are happening in 2023. There are a lot of big ones happening, and we want to organize more competitions, perhaps an interesting event that you might not expect. I'm going to try to get organized. It's going to be really cool.
Interesting.
We just want to, do the two things that matter most in business. Number one is to function fundamentally as a business and do it good. And two is to step out of the comfort zone and push some boundaries and see what kind of opportunities we can create. And long term, I want to be around. I can see myself here when I'm 50 or however old I am, and I don't ever want to lose touch with the community and the employees at the company. I just want to exist, keep existing.
This is a random question that doesn't relate to anything we've said so far. Certain businesses or certain brands rely on the person who created the brand in order to progress and grow. If there was a situation in which you felt like you couldn't put 100% into this business, TheCubicle, do you think that would affect the business in any way? Do you think the business relies on you being a key part of it? Okay,
that's an interesting question. That's actually an extremely insightful question. So to your second question, yes, the business does rely on me to achieve certain results, but I am not central to the success of the business. If I died tomorrow, the business would still be able to function.
Very dark.
It's not there's a spectrum, right? On one end, it's the person starting the business is inseparable from the business, and if he disappeared, the business would just collapse.
Yeah.
And on the other end, it's who cares? If he leaves, then we're fine. We're closer to, or maybe around the middle, closer to the side where it doesn't depend on the person. But I think most of our branding philosophies and company philosophies are ideas that most people can understand, right?
Yeah.
Large inventory, run by cubers so that you can relate to them, always make good, honest content, try to have a sense of humor and, have good community involvement, support the careers of Speedcubers. All those are ideas that if I was incapacitated or disappeared, people would still be able to understand those ideas and carry them out. It's like maybe a convenience that I'm here and I understand a lot of these areas, but I'm definitely not going to cause the business to collapse if I disappeared.
Interesting. Yeah, I was really interested in your perspective on that because there's certain businesses that really rely on that person to be present and put hours in.
Yes.
So I was interested in your perspective on if you were no longer a key part of the business, how it would function.
Yeah, I'm not that person, so I still want to be a part of the business, but it's good to know that if something were to happen, the business wouldn't die. And I think that's the smart way to run a business. You don't ever want to depend on one person too much because it puts a lot of stress on them. It's really not fair either. So we're kind of happy with the situation.
And then a question that I always ask to all the guests now on this podcast is, what do you think cubing content will look like in 5 years?
I want to see more general YouTubers do pieces about cubing. That'd be really fun. If people who were good YouTubers just got into it here and there, into puzzles. I want to see more augmented reality or virtual reality. I think that would be really fun. And probably much more doable 5 years from now.
Okay.
But I also want to see, all the guys that exist now, I want to see them successful and happy. I want to see Cubehead still saying, yo, I want to see Z3Cubing still building his, ridiculous puzzles.
Yeah.
Maybe you're still interviewing people, on this show here. So, yeah, I just want to see the people who found a place in the community still doing what they really enjoy. Yeah, maybe just, the same thing, but with a little bleed into the general sort of YouTubing community would be cool.
I feel like when you said a general YouTuber doing cubing stuff, the first person that reminded me of was Mike Boyd. I don't know if you've come across them before.
Yeah. He did the stuff with daily puzzles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like it's that kind of stuff.
That's a thing, yeah.
Which is like a general YouTuber who picks up the hobby of cubing and maybe shows their progression or whatever.
Yeah.
Interesting. So I had a section here called Answering Phil Yu Tough Questions. Oh no, Asking Phil Yu Tough Questions. So I had a few questions here. So if you didn't have any cubes, any lubes, and you weren't a cube store owner, how would you spend $20 in the cubing world?
I would get an RS3M Super.
Right.
And maybe some cheap silicone.
What do you think you would be doing if you didn't have a business?
Probably be an attorney. I would either be an attorney or a consultant.
Right. For some reason, I feel like you would have gone towards becoming a full-time content creator.
Really? That's flattering. I don't know if I'm cut out for it because my camera work is garbage. I'm not very good at video editing.
I feel like you don't need to be a good video editor to do well on YouTube.
That's true. I have some smart ideas here and there, but I think more likely than not, I would be consulting for other businesses, or I would just be a full-time lawyer.
And then the final question was, what was the worst 3x3 of 2022?
It's a good question. That is a good question. This is the thing about me. I'm not afraid to tell you that a cube is garbage.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you once I find out.
Okay.
I hate the Dian Tengyun V3.
Right, I haven't tried that cube
That's
yet.
a new cube, though.
Yeah.
That's a new cube. I absolutely hate it.
What's wrong with it?
Let's see. So I think the Tengyun has gone backwards. I think the V1 is the best, and then the V2, and then the V3. I honestly think in terms of feel and experience, the V3 is the worst.
I agree with the V1 and the V2 because I feel like I've tried both, and the V1's definitely better, in my opinion. I don't know about the V3 yet because I haven't tried that.
Oh, okay. So the Maru VX3 is pretty garbage.
I didn't even know that cube existed, to be honest.
It's a good thing you don't try it because it's actually bad. So the Maru is not an actual speed cube. I don't think they created the cube with the intention to say okay, this is going to be competitive with modern speed cubes. Oh, okay. I hate the MGC Evo.
Interesting.
3x3. Didn't care for the Dying Tangyun. And I guess they made an MGC Elite V2, which I didn't like either. Yeah, okay, I'm going to stick with the Maru. The Maru VX is pretty bad. So what they did with that cube is it's like horrendously over-engineered. It has like core magnets, core corner magnets. So it has all the tech of like a serious speed cube, except it's just bad. I don't understand how a company can try so hard to make a product fancy, but also fail to make it good. Yeah, I hope Maru doesn't see this. But I'm sure they know that their cube is unfit for speed cubing. Yeah, the Dangyun Tangyun V3 just like made me lose faith in the Tangyun series. I don't care for the V4. Like, when the V4 comes out, I'm just gonna automatically assume that I don't like it. And the MGC Evo was also like, I didn't think very highly of it. So yeah, I think those cubes. I just don't remember a lot of the other 3x3s. A lot of the other puzzles.
If you had to roast the cubing critics / the cubing couch, what would you say?
Dude, I can't do that.
Yeah, you can do it. I'm open to criticism.
No, but like roasting is not like criticism. It's
right.
like just insulting.
So what constructive criticism would you give?
Okay, that's different.
I feel like roasting is just giving someone like the harsh truth.
Yeah, I've seen some pretty unreasonable roasts.
Okay.
It would help if you improved in speed cubing.
How far would you say is good?
I don't know, just keep improving. Eventually you'll be faster than me. I don't think like targeting a specific time is helpful, because once you get there, you're always going to want to go faster.
Right.
But maybe shoot for like a 10 average.
Okay, so that was our podcast with Phil Yu.
Yeah, later.